Are you struggling in poker tournaments, not quite getting the results that you want yet? After you're done watching this video, you're going to know exactly how to play every single hand of the tournament from beginning to finish to the final table to start confidently getting more success in poker tournaments, whether you're a complete beginner, whether you play in the casino, whether you play online. You're going to learn what hands to play, when to bet, when to raise, how to abuse the bubble, how to dominate the final table, and start taking these tournaments down. Let's jump into it. Counting down from 9 to 1. Here we go. All right, guys. Tip number 9 to start dominating poker tournaments is to stay alive early on. Now, we're going to get into some deep strategy coming up here later on in the video, including a couple controversial kind of opinions, especially concerning the final table. And I'm also going to show you how to play a loose and aggressive play style, which again goes against the common wisdom. But first things first, you need to stay alive. I need to tell you straight up that nobody wins a poker tournament in the first hour, but you absolutely can lose the poker tournament in the first hour if you start getting wild and crazy with all the other lunatics going all in with their trash. All right, so first things first, guys, when you first sit down at your poker tournament table, take a deep breath and just watch the action. Study your fellow players for the first couple minutes. Recognize who the crazy players are and do not get involved unless you have an extremely strong hand like pocket aces or pocket kings. Those are the only hands you should be risking your tournament life with in the first hour or so of the tournament. You also want to get in, of course, with all sorts of other strong hands like ace king, ace queen, pocket queens, and so on. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but let me just give you an example straight off the bat here, because guys, if you don't get this down and you go out early in a tournament like most people do, nothing else in this video is going to matter. So for example, you raise ace queen, ace of hearts, queen of clubs, a lunatic raises, another lunatic goes all in. Guys, please just fold. It is not worth it. I'm going to assume you clicked on this video because you want to start winning more poker tournaments. Taking coin flips like this in the early stages is not the right way to get started. All right, let's move on to tip number 8 now, and that is to see lots of cheap flops. So guys, what you really want to do in the early stages of a tournament when these stacks are deep is you want to see lots of cheap flops with speculative hands in order to try to hit a monster versus all of the weaker players. Guys, remember, all of the weaker players are still in the first hour or 2 hours. This is when they're going crazy, going all in, like we just talked about in the previous example. So what you want to do is you want to see a lot of cheap flops with hands like a 9-8 of hearts or a pocket fives, for example. These are hands that can make straights, flushes, 3 of a kind, basically monster hands. What a lot of these weaker players do in the early stages of a tournament is when they actually have a super strong hand like pocket aces, pocket kings, or ace king, they'll tend to just slow play it. They'll just call the blind before the flop instead of shoving all in like they will with their pocket nines or whatever. Don't ask me to explain the logic here. There obviously is none, but this is just how they play. So what you want to do is get in there with these speculative hands, look to flop 2 pair, a big draw, trips, etc. And that is how you're going to be able to get all of the money in the middle when you have a 90% chance to win or greater. That's how you're going to be able to stack early on in the tournament. All right, guys, moving on to tip number 7 now, and that is to identify and isolate the fish early on. Now, the fish is just a term that we use in poker for our recreational friends, the people who just splash around, have fun. They're just there for a good time. They don't take the game seriously like you do. They're not watching videos like this. And you need to understand that the majority of your profits in the game of poker are going to come from these players. So I know it might sound a little bit predatory or something. A lot of people don't like this, but guys, poker is a game played between people, and your success or failure in this game is always going to be directly correlated with who you choose to play against. So as I always say, choose wisely. So you want to choose to play in a lot of pots versus the weaker players who are limping a lot with all sorts of trash, like a 9-6 offsuit, for example. And when I say offsuit, by the way, it means it's 2 different suits. So what you want to do, guys, versus these players is you want to isolate them pre-flop. So they're often going to just call the blind with their trashy hand like a 9-6, like a 10 deuce, like a jack 7. What you want to do is you want to look for hands that have the potential to make a strong top pair. For example, king jack or queen jack. You want to raise these people up when they limp, and then on the flop you're going to make a bet. Most of the time you only need to bet around half the pot, and most of the time they're going to fold. Always remember that a random hand in poker is going to miss the flop roughly 2 out of every 3 times. So therefore this simple strategy is literally going to print you money against these players. Raise them up and make a bet because you know they only have something around 1/3 of the time. All right guys, moving on to tip number 6 to get you winning poker tournaments, and that is to steal the blinds frequently. So guys, this is the easiest way to build a big stack in poker. And make no mistake, by the way, as we're going to talk about in a second, building a big stack is the way to win poker tournaments. This is another idea that goes against a lot of what the so-called experts are saying these days. Guys, the big stack bully is for real. These are the people who win the tournaments, and therefore you absolutely want to build the big stack. And stealing the blinds is literally like taking money from a baby. So anytime it is folded to you on the button or the cutoff, and I'm going to put the image up on the screen right now for you so you know what those seats are at the poker table. The button is the one with a dealer chip in front of it, and the cutoff will always be the seat directly to the right of those. Those are the 2 best seats in poker because you get to act last after the flop, which is an unbelievable advantage in a game of incomplete information like poker. You get to see what they do first. So what you want to do, guys, anytime it's folded to you and you're sitting in one of these seats, if you have anything even remotely playable, king 9, ace 4, 10 8, 7 5, any hands like this, you want to just raise it 2 times the blind. So whatever the blind level is, say the blinds are currently 25 and 50, you want to make it 100 with these hands from the button and cutoff, and then on the flop, once again, you're going to bet half pot the vast majority of the time, whether you hit the flop or not, because once again, we know that they are going to miss most of the time, and that is the only thing that matters. All right, guys, let's move on to tip number 5 now, and now we're getting into the real bread and butter of how you're going to start winning poker tournaments, and that is my number 1 strategy, which is to abuse the bubble. Now, the bubble for some of you newer players is the stage right before the first payouts in the tournament. And what does this mean? It means that everyone's been playing for several hours, maybe 5 hours, maybe 8 hours, and in some tournaments it could be day 2 or day 3, and everybody is scared and frightened. Nobody wants to go home without anything, right? So this is the time when people are folding nearly everything. They don't want to risk their tournament life. And what does this mean for you? This means this is an absolutely golden opportunity for you to build your chip stack in a big way. Guys, professional poker players know that the tournament can literally be won right here by taking advantage of all these weak players. And I'm going to tell you that the players that I target specifically are the medium-sized stacks. So let's talk about the 3 different stack sizes that are likely to be at your table on the bubble. You're going to have the big stacks. Hopefully you are a big stack, and that's going to be, you're going to have around 60, 80, maybe even 100 big blinds. That's a solid position to be in. Then there's going to be a bunch of medium-sized stacks. They're going to have 20 big blinds, 30 big blinds. And finally, you're going to have the desperate short stacks who know that they have to shove all in soon. They're only going to have 5 big blinds or 10 big blinds. Ask yourself in this situation, who has the most to lose? It's the medium stacks, of course, because they know that they can simply keep folding their hand again and again, and they're going to get a guaranteed payday because eventually all of the desperate short stacks are going to get eliminated. It's just a matter of time. So these are the players who are only going to be willing to risk their tournament life if they have something unbelievably strong like pocket aces, pocket kings, and we all know how often those come around. It's around 1 in 220 hands, just if you want to know the crazy math. Not too often. So the vast majority of the time, guys, these players are just free money on the bubble. You want to be raising, once again, just make it 2 times the big blind. You don't need to make it anymore. You want to be targeting these players again and again, but be careful with the short stacks. If you've got total trash, like a 7-4, for example, don't raise on the button when there's 2 short stacks there because you know that they're going to be desperate and they're going to shove all in on you. So bottom line, guys, make sure you identify the stacks that are 20 big blinds, 30 big blinds at your table, and anytime they enter the pot, just shove all in and absolutely target these players. I shove all in against them all the time because I know they're going to fold unless they happen to have aces or kings. All right, guys, let's move on now to tip number 4, and let's talk about after the bubble now. So after the bubble is burst, you're going to have mostly just big stacks and medium stacks remaining, and this is where the real blood and guts of the tournament is played out. This is when people start to really separate themselves and get ahead. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to tell you, you're going to have to take some risky chances in this period. You're going to have to play some big flips, aka coin flips, and specifically you're looking for plus EV situations, and EV is just a term we use in poker that stands for expected value. But most of the time, honestly guys, you're going to be getting it all in with a hand like ace king or pocket jacks, or you've got the pocket jacks, they've got ace queen, ace king. It's roughly 50-50. Guys, you absolutely have to take these big flips. You have to put your tournament life on the line in some situations like this in order to build a big stack, and you need to win the flips. This is just a simple reality of tournament poker that you need to get lucky in a short period of time in order to win. But I can tell you that you definitely will lose the poker tournament if you do not take these chances, because what you're going to do, as we're going to talk about in a sec, is you're going to make the absolutely fatal mistake of allowing yourself to get blinded out. Guys, if you take nothing else from this video, please always remember that all of the money in poker tournament comes from the top 3 places, first, second, and third. Therefore, taking the standard advice of sitting around waiting for big hands like pocket aces and pocket kings is a losing strategy. You're going to have to get in there sometimes and go all in with a hand like pocket jacks. All right, guys, so moving on to tip number 3, which I just alluded to, and that is do not get blinded out. That is what amateurs do, and this is the #1 reason why so many people do not achieve success in poker tournaments. I'm going to tell you that you want to stay above 10 big blinds at all times. I am usually in shove mode anytime I get below 15 big blinds. I am not going to sit around and allow myself to get whittled down to around 5 big blinds or so, because the problem with this is that you're absolutely going to be fighting the math. You're going to have to win multiple coin flips in a row, and we don't need to be math geniuses to understand that this is very unlikely to happen. So if you're getting low on chips, 15 big blinds, 10 big blinds, you need to be shoving with all sorts of hands like pocket sixes, ace 3 offsuit. Now it is going to be situation dependent. If I see that somebody is already shoved and 2 people have called, no, I'm not going to call my tournament life off with ace 3. Really what you want to be doing in this situation in the later stages of the tournament is you want to be the one doing the shoving yourself. This is an absolute key to poker tournaments, is because you always have what we call fold equity, meaning that when you shove over the top on someone, you know that you have ace 3, but in their mind you could have pocket aces, you could have pocket kings, and they're always thinking about this, and many people will talk themselves into folding ace jack here and looking for a better spot. So guys, you always want to be the person doing the shoving, but the real takeaway here is do not allow yourself to get blinded down below 10 big blinds. That is an absolutely losing strategy that will 100% guarantee that you don't have success in poker tournaments. All right guys, let's move on to tip number 2 now to get you winning poker tournaments, and that is to go crazy before the final table. All right, so I'm going to assume that you've used some of the tips that I've already discussed in this video. You've raised the blinds a lot, you've abused the bubble, you've hopefully won some big flips, and you have a big stack late in the tournament. Guys, you want to go into absolute steamroller, maniacal, crazy man mode at this point. This is literally how tournaments are won right here. If you have the big stack, you want to be applying pressure on them literally every single hand. And I truly mean that. When there is less than 50 people left and I have the big stack at the table, I am going to be raising literally every single hand. Okay, I might throw away a 7 deuce or a 9-3, but you get the idea. I'm playing like a maniac at this point for the simple reason, as we've discussed throughout this video, that I want to strike the fear of God into them. I want to let them know that if you play a hand of poker versus me, you're gonna be eliminated, and it's always in their mind. They know that I could have all sorts of crazy stuff, but I could have the pocket aces this time, and that's always in the back of their mind. They're late in the tournament, they're seeing all that big money at the final table, and they'll convince themselves to just lay it down again. And I really want to focus in here on when there's less than 20 players left right before the final table. There's often only 2 or 3 tables left in the tournament at this point, and when you're playing shorthanded like this with 4, 5, 6 players at your table, guys, the expected value of just raising relentlessly is amazing. And the reason why is because there's just so few people at the table. It's just simple math that you're going to get it through more often and take the blinds. And guys, those blinds just absolutely add up and turn you into an absolute monster at the final table. And I should mention, by the way, just before we get to the final table, once again, when you're in maniac mode here, raising 2 times the blind, and it should be noted that the short stacks are going to shove on you sometimes. You need to make some calls sometimes, even if you think they're strong. So I'm going to call with a hand like ace 9 or a hand like king 10, even knowing they've got pocket jacks and have only got around 30 or 40% equity. The reason you want to do this, guys, is because we've built up that chip stack at this point where we're in a position to comfortably take that risk and potentially eliminate someone and pad our chip stack even more. All right, guys, let's move on to the final table now. My tip number 1, and I told you it's going to get a bit controversial here, no deals. So I've taken some flack online about this over the years, but for me personally, my opinion remains the same. I don't do deals at final tables, guys. I am there once again to steamroll the entire table. I am there for first place and first place only. I didn't come there to hold hands, sing kumbaya, and make a deal. I'm there to win. So my rule is simple. I don't make deals at the final table unless I'm playing for life-changing money. And for most of you guys watching this video, I'm going to assume that's going to be at least hundreds of thousands or probably millions of dollars in the case of most people. So for example, if I ever get lucky enough to be at the final table of the main event of the World Series of Poker one day, yes, I will be open to a deal because $10 million, hey, it's a decent chunk of cash. But guys, most people are playing these days for low stakes tournaments, $50, $100 buy-in, and the difference between first, second, and third is only going to be $10,000, $20,000. We're not talking about life-changing money, guys. As I always say, final tables do not come around so often in poker. You have to get a lot of luck in the short term, as we already talked about. So the last thing you want to do is to hedge your bets in a situation like this and potentially give up some of your winnings to weaker players who are still in the tournament. Guys, when you make it to the final table, go for the jugular, go for the win. Don't make deals unless it's life-changing money. Final tables don't come around very often. You need to take maximum advantage. All right, guys, I hope this one was helpful. Make sure you like and subscribe if you found the tips in this video helpful. And if you want to know my entire strategy to beat tournament poker games, make sure you grab a copy of my free poker cheat sheet. That'll be the top link in the description below. All right, guys, all the best at the poker table unless you're on my final table.